All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. You all have been sending in some really interesting stuff about LTO technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to really unpack this. So our mission today is to understand the cost, what goes into it, why are LTO drives, why are they priced the way they are? There's that perception that they might be expensive.
Right.
So we're going to get into all that. We've got articles covering how it's made, what it's made of, who's using it, some of those long-term cost comparisons. And I think that brings us to a really, I don't know, crucial question, especially with newer storage, newer technologies coming out all the time. Is there any truth to the idea that like LTO is ancient technology?
It's a great question. And it's really relevant. And,
Yeah.
to really understand the cost and why it's priced the way it is, let's go back. Let's go back to where it began.
Okay.
And so a lot of your sources actually highlight that LTO, which stands for linear tape open,
Okay.
got its start in the late 1990s. So it's not something that just popped up. It was a major, major collaboration between IBM, HP, and Seagate.
Big player.
Huge players, yeah. And they actually formed what was called the LTO Consortium,
Okay.
and with one real goal, to create an open standard for tape technology.
So this isn't just some sort of legacy system that like just happened to stick around.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was engineered.
Engineered. It was deliberately put together.
Deliberately put together by some major players. Interesting.
Yeah.
And the results of that was, of course, the LTO Ultram format, which was designed to kind of be the alternative to all those proprietary tape formats, back then.
Yeah,
With a focus on high capacity and performance in a single half-inch cartridge.
exactly.
So even in those early days, I mean, how impressive was the capacity even back then?
Yeah. Yeah. Even back in the day, it was pretty impressive.
Oh, wow.
So now let's fast forward to the present. You've got LTO 9, which was introduced in 2021. That offers a native capacity of 18 terabytes.
18 terabytes.
18 terabytes. But here's where it gets pretty interesting. With 2.5.1 compression, you can actually pack up to 45 terabytes
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
onto a single cartridge.
Okay.
And, the roadmap suggests that we're going to see even greater capacity.
Even more.
Even more, yeah.
So 45 terabytes. Now, I mean, I'm curious, how did they actually cram all that data into that space? The articles mention this linear serpentine recording method.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so to achieve that incredible density, right,
Mhm.
to get all that data onto that tiny tape,
Right.
they have to use a very sophisticated way of essentially packing that data in.
Okay.
And one of those is what they call a serpentine method.
A serpentine method.
Yeah, and so the key here is it allows for much greater capacity than older linear recording methods.
Okay, interesting. So instead of just one long continuous track,
Yeah.
the read-write head is laying down parallel tracks
Exactly.
along the length of the tape. Okay.
And then it actually makes multiple passes,
Multiple passes.
going back and forth, back and forth.
Okay.
And with each pass, it actually shifts ever so slightly
Okay.
to cover more of the tape surface.
Like meticulously plowing a field, making sure that you go over every bit of space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this back and forth and this slight shifting side to side, that's what they're referring to as this serpentine recording method.
Yeah, that's the serpentine.
That's interesting. So to keep everything aligned, to keep that plow straight, so to speak,
Yeah.
we have the servo bands, right?
Yes.
The sources talk about these narrow bands that run along the tape.
So they are. They're very, very important because these servo bands actually provide incredibly precise positioning information
Okay.
for the read-write heads.
Okay.
You can think of them, I guess, like microscopic guide rails
Interesting.
that allowed the drive to align those heads with phenomenal accuracy.
Phenomenal accuracy.
Yeah.
That's got to be really important.
It's
essential for getting all those tracks, all that data in there.
It is. It is because you're talking about incredibly high track densities.
Right.
And so, just a slight misalignment,
Yeah.
and it's going to,
It's going to mess everything up.
mess everything up. Yeah.
Wow. So you have this incredibly intricate dance happening
Yeah.
on a microscopic level
Yeah.
just to get all the data aligned.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's incredible. So the articles also highlight, some of the modern features in these LTO drives, and they go way beyond just the basics of reading and writing, right?
Yeah.
There's variable speed, encryption. You can even access the files more like you would with a regular hard drive, right?
Yeah, you can. It's amazing how they've actually packed so many features into this.
Yeah.
Variable speed operation is a real smart one because it allows the drive to adjust its speed based on the data flow.
Okay.
So, it minimizes that shoe shining effect.
Shoe shining.
Yeah. That constant stopping and starting, that can slow things down.
Right, right.
It can cause a lot of wear and tear on the tape, on the drive.
On a drive, yeah.
And then you've got the built-in AES 256-bit encryption.
Right.
And that's really vital to keep the data confidential, especially if you're transporting
Right.
tapes.
Definitely critical for security.
Yeah.
Now, there's this partitioning and this thing, LTFS, linear tape file system.
Linear tape file system.
That sounds like that makes things more user-friendly, I guess.
It really does. It really does.
Yeah.
Because essentially LTFS allows you to treat the tape much more like a big removable hard drive.
Oh, okay.
So you can actually see the files, the folders. In some cases, you can even drag and drop.
Really?
Yeah, which makes it a lot easier to actually share data
Okay.
or access data across different systems.
Wow, that's pretty convenient.
Yeah, and it's self-describing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need proprietary software to see what's on the tape.
Oh, interesting.
And then you have, for certain types of data, like legal records, anything where you need to ensure that it's, the data hasn't been altered, there's that worm capability.
Worm.
Which stands for write once, read many.
Okay.
And that just makes sure the data can't be overwritten or erased.
So that's big for things like compliance.
Yeah, compliance.
Or even like accidental deletion.
Yeah, accidental deletion.
Like in cyber attacks, potentially.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
Now, what about self-describing cartridges? The articles talk about that and this LTO CM chip.
Yes, so self-describing cartridges, it's all about making it easier to manage these large libraries of tapes.
Okay.
So the drive itself can actually read information directly from the cartridge.
Okay.
So it makes it much easier to keep track of all your tapes.
Okay.
And the LTO CM chip, at least in IBM's case, which they actually use across all generations of LTO, it actually stores metadata, information about the information on the tape.
Okay.
So it just streamlines things.
Okay, so when you piece all this together, the high-density recording, the service systems, all these advanced features for security, user-friendliness,
Yeah.
it starts to become a little bit clear why the cost of manufacturing these LTO drives, why it might be higher than simpler storage solutions.
It is. I mean, it is a very sophisticated technology.
Right.
And, as your sources point out, having an open standard like LTO is fantastic for ensuring that different manufacturers can all work together,
Right.
that interoperability. But it also means that there's a certain baseline level of complexity that every LTO drive has to incorporate.
Okay.
And that has an impact on the cost.
Makes sense. So the way that these drives are made, how does that contribute to the cost? The articles explain that it's not just, putting basic parts together. You need specialized components, stringent engineering.
Absolutely. I mean, take, for example, the multi-channel head actuators.
Okay.
So some drives, they use dual-stage 16-channel systems.
Mm-hmm.
And these are just incredibly precise mechanisms that make sure the read-write heads are perfectly aligned.
Okay.
And given the fact that these tapes have very, very high track densities, that alignment has to be spot on.
Yeah, you can't have any room for error.
No, you can't.
It's got to be absolutely perfect.
It's got to be perfect, yeah. And then you have what are called magnetoresistive heads with flat lap technology.
Okay.
And this particular design, it really minimizes the contact between the head and the tape itself.
Okay.
Which is really important because that can reduce wear and tear on both,
Right, so it makes things last longer.
Makes things last longer, yeah.
Now, when you're talking about automated tape library systems, how the cartridges are handled, that has to be absolutely key.
It has to be, yeah.
And the articles talk about independent motors for loading and threading.
Yeah. So by having separate motors that are dedicated to these tasks, it just makes the entire process much more reliable.
Okay.
Especially in those automated systems that are constantly loading and unloading tapes. And the internal components for these automated drives, they're often much more robust.
Okay.
So think all metal clutches, steel ball bearings.
Yeah.
Things that can really withstand that constant heavy-duty operation.
Okay.
Even the electronics are very sophisticated. Some manufacturers, IBM in particular, they use, techniques like engineered copper technology in their integrated circuits.
Okay.
And this boosts performance, and it also reduces heat generation.
Oh, okay.
It's quite amazing.
So we've got all these specialized parts working together.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the fundamental components.
Yeah.
rollers, tape heads, all that.
Yeah,
They have to be manufactured to incredibly high standards as well.
they do.
I mean, do they have to be, like, is it almost like building a high-end scientific instrument?
It is. The manufacturing of all these components,
Mm-hmm.
it requires incredible precision engineering
Okay.
because you're dealing with high capacity, high density, high performance.
Right. You can't cut corners. You have to have accuracy in every single step of the design and then the production process.
Right. And as LTO technology keeps advancing,
Yeah.
more and more data tracks are being added,
Right.
like in LTO 9.
Yeah.
So the precision requirements during manufacturing, even the formatting of the tapes, it's got to be getting more and more critical.
It is. It is because, it's not just putting the parts together, it's making sure that they actually function together
Right.
with microscopic accuracy. And they have to do that consistently and reliably over a very long period of time.
The articles also mentioned that engineers are using computer modeling tools like FEA, MES, to optimize things like how the tape moves through the drive,
Yeah.
and also to minimize wear and tear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of engineering effort that's going into this.
It is. It is because, they're simulating, what happens, over time.
Right.
And it's that level of effort that adds to the cost. Right, right. So the production volumes, they're not as high as some other types of storage.
Right. So unlike, the mass market, where
Yeah.
you have HDDs and SSDs,
Right.
LTO drives are really designed for a very specific enterprise market.
Right.
And while there's a lot of data stored on LTO tape, the number of drives produced is much, much lower.
Makes sense. It's a specialized tool
Yeah.
for specialized needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the LTO drive market, there's only a few key players.
Yeah.
IBM, HPE, Quantum, the original members of that consortium.
Yeah, the original members. And because of that limited number of manufacturers,
Yeah.
it can actually influence the pricing.
How so?
Well, because there's less competition,
Okay.
there's not as much pressure to really lower prices.
Right.
And so it leads to, a more stable pricing environment, which is good,
Right.
but you might not see these huge reductions in pricing.
Like we see with more common things.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Plus, they can't take advantage of economies of scale,
Yeah, those lower volumes mean that they can't really leverage those huge economies of scale.
Right.
And so that leads to higher per unit cost.
Okay, so we've talked about the technology. We've talked about manufacturing, the lower production volumes. So now let's talk about, who the actual customer is for this. What's the market? What's the demand?
Yeah. So the primary application, as you can see from your sources, is enterprise-level data management.
Okay.
So things like backup,
Okay.
long-term archiving of data, transferring large data sets
Okay.
securely. And there's several key industries with really long-term retention needs that use this.
Okay.
So think healthcare,
Healthcare, yeah.
medical imaging, media and entertainment.
Media and entertainment.
Huge. They have digital video archives.
Yeah.
Video surveillance.
Video surveillance, okay.
Long-term footage. That's a big one. And then the geophysical sector, oil and gas.
Okay.
These are a lot. And then you have a lot of different fields that are involved in, high-performance computational analysis. Right. Big data. They use LTO a lot.
So these are sectors that have just like these immense amounts of data that they need to keep safe for long periods.
Yeah.
Long periods of time.
Yeah.
Now, the articles also mentioned that it has a pretty key role in cloud computing.
Yeah.
And also as a really cost-effective archival solution for businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also increasingly recognized as a really important tool for creating these offline, air-gapped copies of data,
Okay.
which are essential for defense against ransomware attacks
Oh, wow. Okay.
and disaster recovery.
Okay.
Because if you have that physical separation from your main network,
Yeah.
it adds a big layer of security.
Wow.
And then you have big data.
Yeah.
The amount of data that's being generated is exploding.
Right.
And so for managing all of that, for analytics, for archiving large digital video files,
Right.
LTO provides a really cost-effective and really a very high-performance solution for that archival.
So the demand is driven by this need for cost-effective, long-lasting storage.
Yeah, especially for data that you don't access constantly,
Right.
So the articles highlight as well, regulatory compliance
Yeah.
as a major driver of demand.
Right.
There's a lot of industries where they're under strict regulations about how long they have to keep certain types of data,
Right.
and they have to make sure that that data stays the same.
The integrity of that data has to be maintained.
It has to be maintained, yeah. And we can't forget about the zettabyte era.
Zettabyte
The zettabyte era. So, the demands of hyperscale computing environments,
Right.
large enterprises. They're driving demand as well.
Right.
So, they're looking for high capacity, reliable archival solutions.
Right.
And that's where LTO comes in.
So media and entertainment with their massive files.
Huge.
I mean, they must be a big segment.
Huge segment.
Yeah.
Huge segment, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the key takeaway is, LTO is focused on these enterprise applications.
Okay.
The drives are engineered and they're priced to prioritize reliability. Long-term integrity.
Right.
High capacity. They're not really trying to compete with, those super cheap consumer options.
So while the demand, within this niche is substantial, it's not as massive as the demand for things like hard drives and SSDs.
It's not. Right?
And that probably has an impact on the pricing.
It does.
Yeah.
It does because, they can't achieve those economies of scale.
Right. The consumer storage market, it's incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
Which drives those prices down.
Yeah.
And so LTO, it operates in this more specialized market,
Right.
allowing the manufacturers to maintain pricing that really reflects, the value that they offer.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we're starting to understand why the cost might seem high initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the articles keep coming back to this idea of initial investment versus long-term value.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. It's true.
Yeah.
That the upfront price of an LTO drive, of buying that first cartridge, it can be higher than buying a hard drive,
Yeah.
of comparable capacity.
Right.
But the real story here, and really the economic argument for LTO is the cost per terabyte of storage over time.
Okay.
Your sources, they show this. LTO tape offers a much, much lower cost per terabyte compared to HDDs and especially SSDs.
Right.
And this is a big deal, this advantage,
Right.
especially as your storage needs grow.
So we're talking, I mean, they have some figures in here. LTO 6, 1.3 cents per gigabyte with compression.
Yeah.
LTO 8, around $60 per tape, 12 terabyte.
Yeah.
Which works out to roughly $5 a terabyte.
Yeah.
I mean, compare that to SSDs.
Huge difference.
Huge difference, yeah.
Huge difference.
And even HDDs,
Yeah.
which are generally cheaper than SSDs.
Yeah.
They typically have a higher cost per terabyte than LTO for long-term, large-scale storage.
That's right.
So the value isn't just in the hardware.
No.
It's in the media.
It's in the media. It's that lower cost over the long term.
Right.
For organizations that need to archive tons of data
Right.
and keep it for a long time.
Right.
And they don't need constant access. It's incredibly economical.
It's a different way of looking at it.
It is. It is.
Yeah. So you might spend more upfront on that drive,
Yeah.
but over time, you're spending less per terabyte thanks to those cheaper cartridges.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a much different financial picture than constantly buying more hard drives or paying those recurring fees for cloud storage.
And retrieving that data from the cloud can be expensive.
It can be.
Yeah.
And, you provided a really good comparison table that really shows this. So you have the initial cost of the LTO9 drive, which is higher than the 18 terabyte hard drive.
Right.
But the cost of the media per terabyte for LTO9, it's much, much lower.
Right.
And if you compare it to an SSD, it's even more striking.
Even more striking.
Even more striking, yeah.
And then, of course, there's the lifespan, which plays into the cost analysis as well.
It does. And that leads nicely into the, the factor of longevity and reliability.
Right.
Your sources really emphasize this as a major justification for, making that initial investment in the technology.
Right, because LTO tapes, they can last for quite a long time.
Yeah. Your sources say that they can have a shelf life of over 30 years.
30 years.
30 years.
Wow.
If they're stored in the right conditions.
Okay.
That's much longer than the typical 5 to 10 years you get with an HDD or an SSD.
Yeah.
And LTO tape is known for its durability. It's resistant to physical damage.
Okay.
Which is really important if you're transporting tapes or if you're storing them long term.
So that extended lifespan, that means that you don't have to migrate as often to newer media.
You do.
And those data migrations, they can be expensive.
They can be, yeah. They can be really expensive.
Now, what about reliability?
Reliability. LTO has a very low, uncorrectable error rate, which is, often superior to hard disk drives. And they incorporate these sophisticated correction codes.
Yep.
And they even have what's called a verify after write technology.
Okay.
So the drive actually reads the data immediately after it's been written.
Okay.
And if there are any errors, it's rewritten.
It's rewritten.
It's
So
rewritten.
it's double-checking itself.
It's double-checking, yeah. And then you mentioned something really interesting,
Yeah.
the redundancy in the servo tracks.
Yeah.
So you actually have two separate servo elements on the recording head,
Okay.
and each band of data has its own dedicated servo track.
So that's like a built-in safety mechanism.
Yeah, so it allows the drive to compensate for any potential issues, whether it's the head or the media itself.
Oh, okay.
And it just enhances that overall reliability.
So you've got longevity, you've got reliability.
Yeah.
That makes a strong argument for the higher price.
Especially when you're talking about data that's mission critical. You can't afford to lose that data.
Right, you can't afford to lose it, yeah. And it's clear that LTO isn't just sitting still. The articles talk about a lot of research and development going on
Yeah.
to advance it.
Yeah. So the LTO consortium, they've got a roadmap.
Okay.
And it outlines their plans for future advancements in capacity and data transfer speeds.
Okay.
And with each new generation of LTO, the focus really is pushing those boundaries.
Okay.
How much data can you store?
Right.
And how quickly can you access it?
Now, the introduction of that timing-based servo system in LTO-9, that was highlighted as a pretty big step forward.
Yeah, TBS is a key innovation because it allows for much greater precision in head positioning.
Okay.
And, LTO-9 also brought in media optimization.
Media optimization.
Yeah, which is, basically where the drive scans the tape and it creates a map of the servo signals to make sure everything's perfectly aligned.
Okay.
And this actually enhances the durability of the tape.
So this investment in R&D, it naturally contributes to the cost of these drives, right?
It does, yeah.
You're paying for those advancements.
You're paying for the innovation.
Right.
Yeah.
So when organizations adopt those newest generations,
Yeah,
they're essentially investing in that cutting-edge technology.
exactly.
And the price reflects that value.
It does, yeah. Well,
Now, what about the competition within the LTO market? We already mentioned that there's only a few manufacturers.
yeah.
IBM, HPE, Quantum.
Yeah.
And that can actually impact pricing as well.
It does, yeah. So the industry has a small number of major players. You mentioned them, the original founders of the consortium.
Right.
Now, while it's an open standard, other companies could theoretically make them.
Yeah.
There's not that many that actually do compared to the HDD and SSD markets.
Right.
And so this more limited competition can lead to less price competition.
Okay.
So end users might not see the same rapid price reductions as in more competitive markets.
Right.
And, pricing is influenced by the generation of the drive, by its features.
Right.
And by each vendor's individual strategy.
Right, right. But in general, it seems like the cost of these drives is higher.
In general, yeah, it is higher.
Higher than consumer grade, even enterprise level hard drives.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so we've covered the technology, the manufacturing, the demand, the value, the innovation, and the competition. But there's one last piece of the puzzle when it comes to cost.
Yeah.
The total cost of ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which goes beyond just that initial purchase price.
Right. It's really important to consider that total cost of ownership,
Right.
or TCO.
Right.
And, that includes not just buying the drives, but also the media, the lifespan, the maintenance, power consumption, environmental requirements. All of that has to be factored in.
LTO drives, they're designed for a long time.
They are, yeah. They're designed for long operational lifespans.
Right.
As long as you maintain them properly. And that mainly involves cleaning them.
Right.
Every now and then, using those universal cleaning cartridges.
So managing all these tapes, these libraries, and the upgrades, you probably need some specialized people for that, right?
You probably do, yeah.
Yeah.
You do need some experienced personnel to manage that.
Okay.
But the good news is, because of the long lifespan of the drives and the tapes, you actually end up with a lower TCO compared to other solutions that might need to be replaced more often.
Okay.
And that can save you money in the long run.
So another factor in LTO's favor is its low power consumption.
Yeah, when they're not actively reading or writing data,
Yeah.
they use very little power.
Okay.